In 2022, our financial needs changed, so I had to start looking for a full-time job, which, as many of you know, that in itself can be a full-time job. So I was looking for work for quite some time, and it took a long time for me to finally get some interviews because I first wanted to do work from home jobs, and I didn't get any interviews from any of those applications, and I sent in tons. So it wasn't until the next year when I started applying to in-person jobs. And so I did get a couple interviews, and there's one in particular that I want to share that comes into play. As you'll see, as you saw in the title, it is signs during my job search that didn't make sense until. So, when I applied for in person jobs, I did get an interview at a place that is about an hour away. So, I hopped in the car. I had to put the address into my GPS and follow the directions really closely because it was a place that I had never even been to. It was in a different state, and a different state that I had never been to this certain part of. So, as I'm following the directions, it mentions, as I'm driving, it's like, now you need to go through this city. And the name of the city was, uh, let's just say it was the name of a very much loved uncle of mine who had passed a few years before, plus the name Hope. And it almost made me cry because I was feeling like, wow, hope, and then the name of this uncle, and I'm on my way feeling hopeful about this job interview. And then after that, not long after that, I drive across a street with the exact same name of the street nearby me, just a mile away from my house here. It had the exact same name as that street, which is my favorite place here in the city that I live. I call it my happy place. It was the exact same name as that street, but it was an hour away. So I was like, well, these have got to be some great signs that this is going to work out. Well, I went to that interview. I walked in. I was early to make sure I got there early and on time. So I walked in, and instantly the vibe was not good. The vibe from some of the other people that worked there was none of it was really verbal. It was kind of like nonverbal vibes of like, what are you doing here? Then I got interviewed by a guy who didn't ask for my references. And believe me, this is a job where you should ask for references because of the nature of the work. He didn't ask for references. He just had kind of like this random sheet of questions and made it sound like we didn't even really need to ask these questions, but he was just going to do it anyways because it was an interview. I was like, okay. But I offered him my references afterwards and like, would you like my references? And he was like, yeah, sure. Okay. So then he takes me on a tour around the place. All I can say is that the vibe during that tour was loneliness. And I don't know how to explain it, but I don't know if the workers there feel lonely, if the children there feel lonely. The vibe was sadness and loneliness. Yikes. Not somewhere where I really wanted to work. But in the interview, we talked about a salary range. I was told one thing. This will be important later. I was told I would get a certain salary range, and then I could take some trainings and get a higher salary. I drive home. It's about an hour drive. By the time I get home and check my emails, I have a job offer. There's no way that he was able to call and contact and chat with all three of my references in that time. Also, in the job offer, the price was lower than the low range listed in the job listing and lower than the pay that he had talked about me having in the interview. I couldn't believe it. I cried because it had been such a difficult job search time, and then to finally get a job offer and have it be for a place that had such a bad vibe to it. It was just a really weird experience. So I looked at the job offer again. I'm like, this is lower than is even advertised in the job listing, and it's lower than the amount that we talked about in the interview. So I wrote an email back and I said, would you be able to start me at this pay, which is a little higher than what we talked about in the interview, because I was just going to be like, look, if this is how it's going to be, you're going to have to offer me more, because also I have a ton of experience, which I mentioned. And he wrote back like a week later saying, I talked with my higher ups and they said we can hire you at that pay. You just won't be eligible for raises. No. Of course I said no. Doesn't matter what the pay is or how much you need a job. Yikes. Bad news. Red flags everywhere. No. So, by the way, I have another video. I'll link it in the description below. I have another video about red flags for job hunting. But anyways, so I was just so disappointed because I didn't understand. I'm like, why all these really cool signs like the city with the name of my uncle and the name and the word hope together? What about the name of that street an hour away in that city that is the exact same name as my happy place here in town? I didn't understand. I was like, well, signs don't always mean what we think they mean, I guess. So fast forward a few weeks after that, and I actually do get an interview in a completely different place. Completely different place. I worked there for about 4 months, but honestly, there were some really great things about it, but I began to realize it was not going to be sustainable for my physical and mental health. So I started looking for other jobs, and I found a listing for a nanny position. I applied, I got a phone interview, and then I was going to have an in-person interview, and they gave me the address. Guess what city I had to drive through? Yep, the one with the word hope combined with the name of an uncle of mine that had passed. And then crossing that street, which is the exact same name of the street that is my happy place here in town, but it's an hour away. I had the interview. It went amazing. Oh, not only that, but the location of the the place where I was having this great interview, I realized I would have driven right by it on my way to that other horrible interview weeks earlier. So the irony. So anyways, I do the interview and it goes awesome, and I got hired, and I still work there. I've been there at the time of this recording. I've been there 10 months and I have no plans to leave. And I just got back from that job. That's why I'm in my car. And as I was passing by all these landmarks, as I do, pass by that street, pass through that city with a special name, it just really struck me. I'm like, you know what? Sometimes signs don't make sense until you look back on it. And you know what? I feel like it's not always wise to make decisions, especially big decisions, based on signs, because sometimes we create signs that aren't there. I think it's better to make decisions out of wisdom and discernment. But you know what? In this situation, I look back on those signs and I'm like, wow, you know what? That's pretty special. Just thought I'd share. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Let's see if I can turn this off without dropping the phone.